Okay, so we're going to jump right into it and start making changes to the file you would have seen from the last unit, which was the JavaScript components. So the first thing we're going to have to do is to create our own style CSS sheet. We've been using the Bootstrap one up until now, so we're going to have to include our own one to start adding our own styles into it. So to do that, we're going to create a new folder and we're going to call it CSS. The naming is not important. You can call it anything you want, but we're going to name the file itself style.css, and when we open it, we're just going to add a test body tag, and we're going to give that a background color. And the purpose here is just to include it now as a link so that that the file is hooked up to our page, and then when it loads, the blue background will tell us whether or not it's working. So when we reload the page, the background's blue, and that means our CSS style sheet's hooked up correctly. So that's great. So we can remove that style straight away because it's of no use to us. It's important to remember where you put your files when you're adding them. I'll come back to that in a moment. In the meantime, you'll see here that we're going to add a new font. So Google has an entire repository of fonts you can use for free by going to Google Fonts. We're going to pick regular and bold weight. And just like our Bootstrap style sheet, we're going to include it as a link. So you'll see here that the Google style sheet that we're including it above our style sheet, but below the Bootstrap style sheet. And that's important. And yeah, we'll just also grab the font family so that our entire page now uses this as its primary font. So yeah, it's important to make sure that you order your style sheets correctly. We need to have the Bootstrap style sheet first, then the Google Font style sheet, and then our style sheet. So what we're going to do here is we're going to split all of our content. Everything was previously in one container. Our grid was in one container, and that one container sat in the middle of the page, and all our content sat within that one container. So we're going to break our content up first into a number of separate containers. So this will give us a bit more flexibility with our design. It'll allow us to do some of those long, full width background colors that you would have seen in the last unit when we were showing off what we're aiming to achieve. So while we're doing that, we're also going to name them. So I've given each container here the container class, but I'm also giving it its own class. So features container, quotes container, alert containers. That's just for myself to be able to remember which each one is. So I'm also removing those article tags. And they were causing an issue there, and we can add them back later if needs be, but for the moment it's fine to just work with divs. We've got some semantic sections throughout our page, and our nav is semantic as well, so that's fine. So I'll be now moving on to just adding these containers to the style sheet. So again, we might not even use these classes. This is all about finding what works for you. I like to sometimes just name out all of the classes that I'm planning on using. If I'm trying to make a module or make a part of a page, I sometimes try and break it down just into all the classes that I'm going to need. And we're not actually going to even use all those classes, but we'll keep them there anyway. So you can see there now on the page, we've got, I think, 4 different containers all the way down. So we're now just going to comment out our alert, and our nav and our alert, because we're going to first work on the call out section, try to improve that. So we'll comment these out just to get them out of the way, because it'll be difficult to see. So you can see that I'm removing some of the old comments. That's just for syntax highlighting. It's the Cloud9 editor seems to be quite picky about where the comments fall. So yeah, reloading the page there, you'll see that the nav and the alert is gone. So with that done, then we can start to focus on our call out. So the first thing we're doing here is we're adding 100 vertical height. So you probably won't have seen this before. It's an experimental or kind of more modern way of creating heights. So here we're creating the call out section. We're telling it to assume the entire height of the browser window. So depending on what your browser height is, it'll fill that entire space. And now we're going to add a full width background image. That's that big image of the whiskey glass that you would have seen. And to do this, we're going to go to a web page and we're going to look for a snippet. We don't need to remember this all ourselves. Sometimes you just want to go to Google, find what you need and copy and paste it. And it's fine to do that as long as you have permission to take that snippet. There's no problem there. Just be careful of what you're copying and pasting. You'll notice here below the background that there's some vendor specific tags. They're the -webkit, -moz, etc. These are specific vendor prefixes for certain CSS things. that don't work across all browsers the same, you sometimes have to include these. And it depends. It's less and less common now. Most browsers are converging in their functionality. So you'll generally see less of these, but just be aware of them. They're called vendor prefixes. And you'll see here that our image isn't loading. So I've done something wrong. The problem I first thought was that I didn't have quotes around it, but it's actually a path issue. So my images folder, or my style sheet, for example, is within a folder. So I need to put a // to move myself back to the root folder to be able to go into the images folder and get the whiskey background. So in the meantime there, I've just reloaded the page. You'll see now my really nice cover background image. It's it kind of sticks on the page as you scroll. So now I want to center the text. And there's lots of ways to do this. You generally would do this with JavaScript, or traditionally you do it with JavaScript. Flexbox is a more modern way to do this, and you may or may not have come across this Flexbox as a positioning system within CSS. It's, you know, it takes a bit of learning, so it's something you might want to go and look up yourself. But for us here in this particular situation, it's a really quick way of just vertically aligning our text within the container, which is quite a hard thing to do actually with CSS traditionally. You might need JavaScript, or you would have traditionally needed JavaScript to do it, or hacks to try and do it. So Flexbox makes it much easier. So we're just going to use that. And like I said, if you're not familiar with it, you can Google it and see how you get on. So in the meantime now, we're just changing some of the transparency, and we're going to change the text and just play around with the borders to try and get our Jumbotron element looking a bit better. So here, notice my first instinct was to create a new class to target the H1 header so that I could change the color. And as I've done that, you'll see now in a second that it doesn't work properly. So I'll reload the page and I won't actually get the changes that I expected. And this is down to a specificity problem. So this is something you're going to definitely come across in some way. Basically, the style from Bootstrap is overriding my style, my Jumbotron dash header. So I need to change my rule so that the specificity matches and my styles overwrite the Bootstrap styles. Again, this is something you'd probably want to Google and have a closer look at. Just remember that the term specificity is a word to go to if you're having problems trying to get your styles working, or you're noticing that you're applying styles but they're not actually showing up. It's usually the case that your rule is losing out to another rule that has a higher specificity. So we're now going to just make some small text changes to our elements, just to kind of play around with them. So you'll start to see here that we can now start live editing in Chrome. This is a really powerful feature, and I'm going to use it throughout the rest of these videos. You can just start writing your styles straight into the browser, into the DevTools browser, to see the changes live and to kind of just toy with them and tweak them until you get what you want. This doesn't actually change your underlying file. You're still going to have to copy and paste these back into the file and then reload the page. But what it does allow you to do, you'll see me doing that there. I'm going back now and I'm actually copying what I had in the browser back into my file. And now I'll reload the pages and those styles will have saved. So while you'll still need to do that copy and pasting, it's a great way to just play around with designs in the browser and see what works and maybe tweak a margin here or there. So now I'm working on one of the dividers below the H1 header. So I just want to get a kind of, it's a HR element, so it's a line break across the page, and I'm just restyling it to give it a bit of a more unique block-like feel. So I'm going to give it a color. I'm just going to use the color picker here, which is again another great tool that you can use to play around with different colors and see what you like on screen in real time. And then I'll copy that back to my Bootstrap land, or back to my CSS file eventually, once I've added this class name. And this is just, again, this live reloading is indispensable. You'll generally find your own way, your own process for making changes. This is what works for me. I like making the changes in the browser first and then moving them back into the file. There's actually, Chrome has a more advanced feature called workspaces, where you can actually link up your files and the browser itself. And this is a really great advance. It means that you can just write your styles into the browser and then they get persisted and saved to your CSS file without you ever having to do this back and forth. But that's not something we're using here, and it's again an advanced feature that you might want to look into yourself. So here we're just adjusting the divider styles. I'm using these modifier classes. So I have a block divider class here that's going to give me the core styling for my divider, which is its width and its height. And then I'm adding a second class name called block divider orange to apply the color separately. And the reason for doing that is that we can change the color later. We might want block divider white or block divider black. And having these modifier classes separate to our core class, that gives us a bit of flexibility there. So the next thing here now you'll see is that I'm actually editing the HTML now live in the browser. So that's a really powerful feature again, as well as below where I'm editing the classes, I can also play around with the actual HTML and see what's happening. So what we're doing here is we're going to add an opaque overlay to try and take the edge off the background image. So it's very bright at the moment. So I'm going to add an overlay across the entire callout section, which you'll just have seen pop up there as a black background. And by using this RGBA color, I'm able to affect its transparency, and you'll see now that it kind of comes up a bit, and it just takes that edge off the image, and it kind of makes the text stand out a little bit more. So to do that, I have to create this opaque overlay element here, and it's positioned absolutely, and it's 100% height and it's 100% width. So again, I was playing around in the browser. I now have to write these changes back to my file, and I'm just going to include the actual div element now that's going to achieve the overlay for us. So this is a standard way of creating that kind of, like we could have done that in Photoshop. We could have got the photo and gone to Photoshop and added the overlay, but this is a more HTML friendly way. We can change it later on if we want to try a different opacity or anything like that. So it's a really nice way to just add overlays, and you'll see that it didn't affect any of the text. It sat behind the text in front of the image. So now we're just going to adjust the call out button, or the call to action button. And this is, again, using these modifier classes. There's nothing special about how I've named the classes there. BTN --CTA. That basically, when you write your own CSS, you have to decide on how you want to name it. There's no be all and end all. How you name your class names is up to you. So there's different approaches, and the way that you see me doing it here is called BEM, B-E-M, block element modifier, and it's just one approach to how you write and structure all of your CSS. You can investigate some of these separately if you want to Google them. BEM is one, SMACS, S-M-A-A-C-S, I think, is another, and these are all approaches to formatting your CSS to try and make it more sensible, because as your projects get bigger, they're going to get harder to manage. So you'll see I'm now I've written some styles for the button to make it red and to give it a kind of curved border radius, and I'm now writing the styles for the pseudo elements. So these are the hover states. So basically when you hover over a button or when you click a button, these styles act a little bit separately to the button itself. So as I do this, I'll jump back and forth just to see that while the button was previously going grey, it's now going, or it's continuing to stay orange. So you can also see that Chrome allows me to play around with these hover states in the browser as well. So if I don't want to have to actually move my mouse over the button, I can just click the Hov tab that you see there and do it in real time. So I've now just set a slightly different background color that I'm going to include. So that's going to be the first round of changes. That was quite quick and quite a lot of information to take in. If you want to go back, listen through it again, maybe a bit more slowly. And in the next lesson, we're going to hit some of the navigation and the alert section.